I now call Baroness Fox of Buckley.
My Lords, I will indeed consider voting for either the regret or the fatal motion or the regret amendment from my noble Lords. But despite this, I do want my Honourable Lord Bethell to note that many of us here do understand that you and the government are under huge pressures. But I also appreciate that in a period where gotcha blame game is the way that we go in politics, the politicians can become terrified and defensive and reactive. They often won't admit mistakes and therefore can't learn from them. They make every pronouncement black and white, delivered with a definitive certainty, with no nuance and certainly no room for disagreement. And one tactic is to avoid blame by attempting to hide behind the science and a reliance on what passes for irrefutable evidence. But as we all get bamboozled by data and graphs and charts and forecasts and infection rates, no mention is made of the wider principles undermining decision-making. But when evidence substitutes for judgments, policy is ring-fenced off from accountability, and it can create a fatalistic mood in society where people are told that there's no choice. It wasn't ever thus, even in this COVID period. Remember, my Lord, at the start of all this, when hundreds of thousands of people were mobilised as NHS volunteers eager to help take on COVID. Even if lots of them never received an email, they showed that there was a willingness to actively create a shield around the vulnerable and to act in social solidarity. But contrast that now with people at the end of their tether. Your policies, the government's policies, have demobilised people, demanded passivity and compliance. People told to shut up, pot up, we know best. But is that true? Because surely in an emergency, more than ever, politicians could do with a hand. And I urge ministers to draw on the resources, the intellect, the intuition, the common sense and the intelligent criticisms of millions of people in order to move forward. But I want you for a minute to imagine what it feels like to be in Wales at the moment. They've endured a lockdown, and their reward from Welsh Labour is a 6 p.m. curfew, more Puritan prohibition than science, with utter indifference to the destruction of hospitality jobs. By the way, a shout out to the 100 North Wales publicans who banned the First Minister from pubs for 18 months. Hear to them. But it illustrates the infuriating way that citizens are treated, victims of arbitrary diktats from on high and never involved in any debate. You might disagree with me, my Lord. You think I'm mad? That's good. Start to a civilised debate. Anyway, all this is unnecessary and not the way we should move forward. Because I think that the technocratic approach is bad for science and bad for democracy. Science is in danger of being turned into a set-in-stone tablet and a dogma. The very strength of the scientific method is about challenging and testing hypotheses and is being corrupted by an adherence to the science. And then those scientists who raise concerns about the official narrative have their professional reputations traduced as fake experts, shills, their interviews censored, dubbed in some misinformation, and heckled as mad. But surely, with a new virus, we need to hear all scientific views, not just those of SAGE, and all scientists, pro and anti-lockdown, should be prepared to have their work rigorously scrutinised and critiqued, and none should be silenced, or important questions won't even be asked, let alone answered. But the technocratic approach is also bad for democracy. Why? Because it narrows down the debate to solely assessing responses to COVID through quantifiable measures. I confess we all get dragged into reducing the debate down to its most narrow parameters. We're all wasted hours on the minutiae of the differences between tiers 2 and 3 and what they allow. And that crude utilitarian approach even means that we're all tempted to parade death figures to make our case. Pro-lockdowners say COVID deaths versus anti-lockdowners who emphasise neglected cancer patients, heart disease victims and suicides. But this counting the bodies approach is only available if the government only allows us to think of health, longevity and safety as the only value in this debate. But it means that we miss the bigger picture. Yes, we can count the horrifying number of job losses due to lockdowns, not COVID, but there's more immeasurable aspects to this. Unemployment, losing one's life savings and bankruptcy isn't just about money. It robs people of dignity, their agency, their sense of worth. It demoralises people. They feel useless. Yes, we can count the number of elderly and vulnerable lives allegedly protected by lockdowns. But how do you measure the cruelty of locking up so many people in effectively solitary confinement, deprived of love and stimulation? You can count how many cases there are of rising COVID, but it is not a sign of libertine recklessness that millions are bereft because they are denied conviviality, civil society, time with their mates in the pub, at the football and so on. It's called civil society, it's called society. But the greatest value sacrificed is our attack on freedom. Not just the frightening number of new laws micromanaging our lives or the relentless attacks on freedom of association in churches, our own homes and on protests. Worse than that, it's political leaders behaving like little emperors, throwing the public scraps of freedom for good behaviour and then expecting them to be grateful and then grasping them back for misdemeanours. Citizens are rendered helpless, expected to be happy that they've been given a mere 5 days as a Christmas dispensation. Do you know how demeaning and frustrating it is to feel that one's destiny is in the hands of sage behavioural psychologists who believe that board games and Christmas shopping are an existential threat to society? All this seems so counterproductive, that's my point. Remember, politicians are asking society to do something historically unprecedented.
My Lords, I just need to remind the noble lady of the time limit.
OK, you've got the gist. Some people say I'm mad. I would appeal to the government to turn back to the people, the citizens, and trust them and not be distracted by the opposition. Thank you.